Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. In this video, I'm going to be building a pair of dovetailed pencil cases out of maple, babinga, and sapele, so let's jump into it. I start off by rough cutting these boards to width before running them through the jointer. These boards had a small amount of warp to them, so by narrowing them out beforehand, it would allow me to keep them as thick as possible before moving from the jointer to the bandsaw. I started off at the bandsaw and eventually moved over to the table saw because I was getting a decent amount of blade drift and burning. That could have been remedied by changing the blade on the bandsaw, but I was both too lazy for that and didn't have a new one on hand. Ultimately, the extra width of the table saw blade didn't make a difference, but I was definitely erring on the side of caution by using the bandsaw. I then let those freshly resawn boards sit for a couple days before rejointing them and planing them to final thickness. Typically after resawing, you're releasing tensions in the wood, which could cause some wood movement. I got pretty lucky here and didn't have a ton of movement in these pieces though. Once the boards were planed down to their final thickness, I could rough cut them to length on the table saw using my crosscut sled, and then moving over to the shooting board, I could dial in their final length. Now that my components are prepped, I can use my workpiece as a reference and set my marking gauge to the correct depth and scribe for my tails and pins. For some reason though, even though I set my depth using the actual workpiece, they're always a little shy of the true depth that they should be. If you know why that is, please let me know what I'm doing wrong in the comments. Once the carcass was assembled, I could cut the back panels to size. And because these won't see too much abuse, this is just 1/8 inch Baltic birch plywood glued into place. This next little detail was an on-the-fly addition. Using a small cove bit, I cut a groove to hold a pencil instead of having to reach into the drawer every time, or leaving it on the desk, which would kind of defeat the purpose of this whole build in the first place. I could then apply a coat of finish to help protect the case while things were being moved around the shop. Speaking of drawers, let's get started on those. What you're seeing me use here is what Rob Cosman calls the Sean shim, and basically what it lets you do is shift your workpiece one saw curve to the left or the right, and using that little sawtooth marking knife, you can make a cut exactly where it should be depending on the width of your saw blade. In the last 6 shots or so, I've been cutting what's known as a half-blind dovetail. And not to get too technical, all it is a dovetail that ultimately will only be seen when the drawer is open. There are a ton of videos on YouTube of people more well-versed than me in cutting this joint, so I'll let you watch one of those videos instead of me doing a mediocre job explaining how to cut them. I will say, however, that I did make the lap portion of this joint way too small, and because of that, I ended up with some tear out on the front of the piece as a result, but you'll see that at the end of the video. And there you have it, guys. 2 functional pencil cases. This was more of a skill building project, not necessarily something to be as fine a piece that I can make, but more learning how to do things. These half-blind dovetails on these drawers were definitely my first time doing those. Trying to get a little bit more exposure with the dovetail, and obviously trying to make something pretty, right? With this pommel babinga and this nice curly pommel-ish sapele. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll roll some beauty shots.